What's up, golf friends? This is Jim Colton, and this is the Driven Golf Podcast. I am here with the super producer, Joseph K. What's going on, Joseph?
Hey, not much, Jim. How are you, sir?
Doing good. Doing good. We're running a little bit late this week. This is episode 23. We're going to be dropping on Thursday instead of our normal Tuesday. We had some circumstances getting in the way. We were at the U.S. Junior last week in Michigan, and not only were you the super producer for this episode, you were the super looper last week at the U.S. Junior. Also, we got to witness the first 18 holes of the final match between Tyler Watts and Trevor Gachesky. What were your takeaways from that match?
Yeah, I first of all, I want to thank you for dragging me out of bed kind of early to watch that match. Not that I had anything else better going on, but yeah, those guys came out firing right away. I mean, on all cylinders. There was no wind. It was ideal scoring conditions. I think Trevor was 6 under through 6. Tyler Watts hit the flag on number 3, a par 3, and then got an unlucky break and drained the 30-footer. Trevor holed out on number 6 for eagle. So yeah, we saw some really good golf early, and shout out to Trevor for grinding out that long week. I know there's a lot that goes into outlasting all those opponents for, it's a lot of golf to play.
Yeah, for sure. And if you believe the narrative that was out there, it was David slaying these junior Goliaths, but really Trevor Gachesky, one of the top juniors in the country, and he proved it this week. The USGA, like their social media, they do a good job of the storytelling throughout the week. But one of the things they put out there was like, can you believe this guy with the 3570 Wagger ranking, is made it all the way to the finals? And that didn't really resonate with me because I know Trevor a little bit about his game. He was in the final pairing with my son at the Junior Byron Nelson, was in contention there. He's an absolute stud. He's going to the University of Florida. So I started looking into his Wagger profile, and we posted an article. I just want to point people to it on driven.golf. But basically, we sort of realized that there was this strange Wagger policy issue that ignored 5 of Trevor's finishes. And if you included those 5s, he'd be more ranked 1600. So there's really just kind of a strange thing. But in any case, I encourage folks to check that out if you want to understand a little bit more about Wagger. And maybe this is an issue, like a USGA champion getting caught up in this Wagger issue. Maybe it'll shed light and lead to some change in the future. We can only hope. So anyways, congratulations to Trevor, a truly deserving champion on a truly wonderful and championship course at Oakland Hills. It was an awesome week.
I was going to say he was probably the second most prominent story of the week. We had Charlie Woods and Tiger Woods on site. So we've got to touch on that a little bit. There was a buzz around Oakland Hills. He was 4 groups behind us, and we saw him during the practice round. So what were your thoughts on seeing the Woods family out there?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was definitely probably the most hyped junior event in recent history for sure. The one thing about Charlie, look, he didn't make the cut. He didn't miss the cut by a mile. But I think given where he is at and his journey, let's not read too much into it. Let's just view this as a building block that's only going to help him in the future. I think there were only 15 people in his class, the 2027 class, that were in the U.S. Junior. And I would imagine nearly anybody who's anybody is going to try to attempt at that age to make it to the U.S. Junior. So there are literally hundreds of junior golfers his age and his grade that would gladly trade places with him and shoot 82 and 80 in the U.S. Junior. The experience that he got from that can only help him in the future. So I don't think we need to make any sort of grand proclamations about who he is or what kind of golfer he's going to be. He is an unfinished product. So let's just all preach a little bit of patience when it comes to Charlie. But yeah, we got to see Tiger. He was doing the golf dad thing, pretty heavily involved golf dad during the practice round. Being on the putting greens and scoping out, hole locations and that sort of thing. But look, he has a lot to offer, so we'll cut him a little bit of slack there. But yeah. Speaking of championship golf courses, the USGA's going from Oakland Hills. They're going to Hazeltine National in a few weeks. And it's a great segue for this episode 23 with Chandler Withington. We really wanted to talk to him in advance of Hazeltine, given he was the head pro for a number of years at Hazeltine National, and has since kind of moved out of being a head professional into this Archive 22. He's taken his passion for the game, his passion for the history of the game, and has really branched into a really cool area, selling these posters that really kind of highlight the history of the U.S. Open, the PGA Championship. It sounds like the Open Championship as well. But one question I have for you, Joseph, like listening to this interview, have we met our match? Like, we're the Driven Golf Podcast, but I think he's probably more driven and more passionate than anybody I've ever met in the game of golf.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I think he embodies everything that we stand for and what we're trying to accomplish here with the Driven Golf Podcast. You can see right away, just from chatting with him for a few minutes, his passion and love that he has for the game and his willingness to give back. And I think we were chatting a little bit before the episode launched or before we started recording, and he was just gung-ho to give us all the advice and everything we needed to be prepared for Hazeltine. So Chandler is instantly, one of the nicest guys I've ever met, and I haven't even met him in person. So it's a great episode, and I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Yeah, for sure. All right, the last segment, speaking of folks in our golf circle that are doing everything they can to move the game forward. Andrew Lewis in Angle of Attack. This segment, we're starting this, helping golfers get from that 74 range to 72. Which is like we're getting into the very, very elite levels. And one of the concepts that we talk about in this episode is a concept that I'm not super familiar with, and that's ball control. So it's really a foreign concept to me, but I was really interested in hearing Andrew's thoughts on these elite golfers, on their ability to predict where the ball is going to go. And the term that he used over and over again was blueprint, like having a blueprint for your swing and your ball flight. That leads to predictable results, leads to getting more birdie opportunities, particularly on par fours. And I think that's really where you see a key difference in these two categories. And one of the things that he mentioned in the episode was he mentioned that he could really help point a golfer in the right direction within like 10 minutes, like get them a blueprint within 10 minutes. And I think you saw that actually firsthand, because I think you got a mini lesson from him last Friday when we were in Michigan. So what was that experience like?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be on the receiving end of Luke Colton and Andrew Lewis's quick 10-minute golf lesson. Like you said, that's all I need. That's all I have enough attention span for. So yeah, it was a quick, easy, just one little swing tip that, with the driver, which is a super important club that you should never shy away from if you're trying to gain distance, or, it's a club you're going to hit many times in a round. So yeah, he just gave me a simple little quick drill to do and nothing crazy technical. And I feel like I was on my way and feeling confident, and conviction is a big part of being able to shoot those low scores. So that's what he talks about.
I'm a little scared after seeing you hit seed after seed after seed. So you now have this blueprint, you have this go-to. And I think the conviction you mentioned is a really a key thing that you'll hear in this episode. So with that, let's get into it. This is episode 23 with Chandler Withington. Chandler Withington, welcome to the Driven Golf Podcast. How's it going?
So good to be talking with you guys. Jim, great to finally meet you and get to be talking with you.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit earlier. Like I think our golf circles have been kind of swirling around with around each other. So it's great to finally connect. Really excited. I think we'll be meeting in a few weeks. Hopefully at the U.S. Amateur and at Hazeltine. For folks who may not be aware, Chandler was a longtime head professional at Hazeltine National in Minnesota before moving into other ventures, where we'll dive much deeper into that as this episode goes along. I think for anyone who follows Chandler's Instagram account, which is your name, Chandler Withington, two things are really apparent. I think that you get around and you get to play a lot of and see a lot of really cool golf courses, but your love of the game, your respect for the game really shines through, and it's something that I really admire, and I'm sure folks will get that out of this episode. So why don't we go there? Like, where did this love for the game start? Like, let's get into like your origins in the game And, where did you get the bug?
Yeah, Jim, I'm a product of growing up in Basking Ridge, New Jersey. And this is late 80s, early 90s. When I was growing up, I didn't know a single person who played the game of golf.
Wow.
The only person that I knew that played golf was the retired fire chief who lived next door to us. This guy was in his 80s, sat out in his driveway, smoked a pipe. So my impression of golf was, well, this is the sport you start playing right before you die. So when you can no longer run, jump, catch, swim, do anything like that, you start playing golf. Now, growing up, I played baseball and hockey, so I wanted to play the active sports. But I think it's when they started hitting home runs off me in Little League that my dad kind of came to me and said, what about golf? The pastor's kids play golf. Would you consider playing golf? We actually took a trip down to Hilton Head Island, spring of '92. This coincided to be the week after the Masters. We're staying on Harbor Town with a family from South Carolina, and all my cousins from Atlanta came over. They were more the golfing side of the family, and the PGA Tour is going on in our backyard. And they said, "Let's go watch golf." And I said, "Guys, I'm good. You guys go right ahead, have fun." But there's nothing else going on, so they got me out of the house, and they got me behind the par 5 fifth tee at Harbor Town. Now, this is early 90s when the sounds of the game, we still had persimmon was still a part of the game. Metal spikes were still a part of the game. So to be a 14-year-old kid and kind of hear the metal spikes coming up the cart path, everyone would be quiet. The sea would kind of part, and in would walk this player with a caddy walking behind with this big bag of shiny clubs. And, watching players hit drives, I think anybody who's listening, you remember the first time you watched live professional golf, like it makes an impression. And watching guys hit drivers was already starting to get me. And then a younger player, young back then was 26, 27. That was young back then. Came around and hit a persimmon driver out of sight. And I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. We ended up following him around that week, and he ended up winning. So driving home from South Carolina to New Jersey, I remember telling my dad, I was like, I want to learn how to play golf. Who could teach me how to play golf? And if I ever get to do anything close to what I just saw out there on the golf course, like life will be pretty good. So my education as a kid was I got home and I started VCR, and whenever golf was on, and when my favorite player was in contention, I would especially set the VCR. People who are listening might not know what a VCR is, but that's like YouTube in the 1990s. Was you had to tape record and then rewind it and play it again. And I would just try to take what I saw on TV and go in the backyard and swing the club the same way. I mean, that was my education, and that was my start.
Who was that PGA professional that won that week?
Davis Love III.
Oh, that's interesting. And he won that tournament a bunch, right?
He won Harbor Town, 5 or 6 times. It just coincided, to be there. I think to go a little further with the Davis Love connection, that was in '92. 12 years later, I ended up working at Seminole for the Winters, and they have the great pro member. And Bob Ford, who's the pro, knew. He's like, "You've never met him, have you?" And I said, "No." He goes, "Were you going to caddy for him?" And I think I know a lot of people who have met their heroes, and it's a scary thing because not a lot of people have great stories about being their heroes, and we hold them on such a pedestal. And I remember the night before then, I was like, if this guy's not nice to me, it's going to crush me, because there's not another player that I wanted to watch or be like. The great news is Davis could not have been nicer to me or more encouraging on my path as becoming a PGA professional. His dad was a PGA pro, and that started a nice friendship. Caddied for him again the next year, and then fast forward another 12 years, they announced that he's going to be the captain at Hazeltine National, where I was their pro.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you think, like, when you said Davis Love, the first thing I thought of was that he was the Ryder Cup captain at Hazeltine. But like, how did this path go from thinking, okay, I want to chase this as a profession, to actually being an assistant at Seminole, and I think also Marion, and then ultimately to Hazeltine? Like, what was that journey like?
Well, it wasn't even my dream growing up. I don't know if you guys can remember when you meet with your guidance counselor in high school and they say, "All right, Jim, Joe, like, what are you guys going to be?" And my answer for years was, "I'm going to be an architect."
Oh, wow.
And I remember saying, "I'm going to be an architect." And, she kind of smiled, looked back at me and said, "That's great. And you'll be great at it. But, tell me what else you like to do." And I thought it was more of these, more like, tell me more about yourself type questions. What I didn't realize at the time, what she was really saying was, you don't have near the grades to become an architect, so let's figure something else out. So I was just starting to hear about these professional golf management schools. I had gone to golf schools in Pinehurst at Pine Needles and learned about one called Campbell that was just north of
Mhm.
there. And that's the road I went down. I never heard the word architect come out of her mouth again. And I had a blessed road in golf, but I think coming out of school, Jim, I started in Chapel Hill. I went through 2, 3 years there and suddenly got laid off from my first job. And it was this kind of fork in the road of, is this really what I'm going to do in my life? Or is it, I'm not so committed to it that I can't jump off and try something else. But I stuck with golf, ended up going back to New Jersey. I think I got lucky, Jim, and when I was doing my internships, I interned at a place called Canoebrook in New Jersey. They have a lot of the sectional qualifiers for the U.S. Open there. I didn't know that the head pro was a former assistant at Oakmont. I didn't know who Bob Ford was, the head pro at
Mhm.
Oakmont, who became the head pro at Seminole as well. And I didn't know how this whole industry worked. But in just getting lucky with the timing of who I ran into, take advantage of the opportunities that were given to me, I found myself going down to Seminole in the winter of 2004. And I lived like a gypsy or a nomad for a couple of years, going back and forth between New Jersey and Florida. Twice got passed over for promotions. And the two people who passed me were the two people that turned around. The first person, his name was Kevin Muldoon, was leaving Marion Golf Club in 2007 to go be the lead assistant at Shinnecock Hills. And he turned around and walked me into the job at Marion. And then 6 years later, the second guy who leapfrogged me at Seminole his name was Nathan Olhoff. He's the head pro at Interlochen here in Minnesota. He's the guy that sent me the job post for Hazeltine National. So I share that young story because I want young people to hear that you never know who's going to open the door for you. You never know where the help is going to come from. Some of the people that pass you by, or maybe sometimes to be underneath you, might be the very people that help you. So I try to remind people that you're interviewing for the job every day, and you never know where the help is going to come from. And if you kind of live your life with that open mindset, you look at every person that you meet as an opportunity.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Chandler, because I think one of the reasons this podcast exists is I think we want to show our listeners, we tend to skew towards more like youth golf development, but also we want people to chase the dream. Like many people want to be a golf professional, they want to be a tour professional, but then also see that there's this world of golf, which is just like the greatest game that man has ever invented in my mind. But just that the people around the golf just tend to be the greatest. I mean, I think that folks that when you see someone who has a passion for golf, that they are willing to go bend over backwards and help that person out because you share this common addiction, this common bond. And I have this saying all the time, and I tell my son this: it's like, if you golf, like, you are my friend. How can we make these connections? Like, how can I help you in the game? And I think that you're a living example of this in terms of like the relationship building, the networking, that I think it just comes from this common bond of having this love for the game. Because as a PGA America professional, it's not always a glamorous, it's often not a glamorous life. There's a lot of long hours. There's a lot of like hard work involved, and you guys share that bond of like being in the trenches together, right? And like you said, that's folks that get it and folks that know that, hey, these are good people that love the game. That's the thing that opened doors for people. And like, I think you're living proof that it's really life changing.
Yeah, Jim, I think what I found in my time in the game is it kind of reminds me of a book by a guy named Adam Grant. It's called Give and Take. And there are really three types of people in this world. There are givers, there are takers, and then there are matchers. And we all kind of know who those people are. When you run into somebody, you can easily categorize them. And are they a giver? Are they a taker? Somebody told me early on with the golf industry, they say, like, you'll get into the golf industry because you love playing the game. You'll stay in it because you love sharing it with other people. And I think when I think of PGA professionals, and you and I were talking before I came on, I've started recording a podcast of my own for people that work in the golf industry. And when I ask people these stories of how they got started in the game of golf, just about everyone I've talked to so far has had a PGA professional put their arm around them at some point in their life, and invite them to come into the game. And look, I had Davis Love, invite me to come on this journey. And then my pastor, my church, put his arm around me. And then I went to FCA golf camps and I had a PGA pro teach me how to play the game of golf. and Peggy Kirk Bell. But I think we all look back on this journey. At some point, we probably came across a PGA professional because those are the people who were trying to bring people into the game. And that was my great opportunity for over 25 years. It was an honor. It was a privilege, and it was sacrificial to what you just mentioned about the hours that we spend in the game. But it's a labor of love, and those are the brethren, like the men and women that serve this game, and not just golf professionals or teachers or superintendents, but it's so many people that look at how many people you interacted with this last week at the U.S. Junior at Oakland Hills that work within this game. I think we all carry that mindset. We're all here to help each other. I have received for years. I've been the beneficiary of help. Like, who am I not to give that back? And if we all kind of carry that mindset, we'll be okay.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I know Tony Pancake at Crooked Stick a bit, and we had him on in episode 11 of the podcast. And Tony's just a pro's pro, but I think a lot of the stuff that you touched on, and just being a people person, just a true professional. And I think I truly think that a head professional is such a noble profession, because you're really on the front lines of growing and fostering that love of the game for members, for young people. And those, like I said, those are life-changing things that can really impact people in ways that they never even thought possible. So I really appreciate, like you said, the decades of work that you had in that profession. The other thing that Tony mentioned, some of the experience of being at a championship course like Crooked Stick, and I think your experience at Hazeltine as well, of actually hosting championships. I mean, I think Hazeltine was built really with the intent of hosting high level tournaments and premier championships. If folks may not be aware, one of Payne Stewart's 2 U.S. Open victories, his first was at Hazeltine. I think it was a playoff, as I recall, in 91. I was in high school at the time when that would happen. And the other thing with Hazeltine, they had two PGA championships. Tiger Woods was second in both of them, right? I think the first one to Rich Beam in 2002, and then Y.E. Yang in 2009. And I remember exactly where I was at the end where Y.E. Yang hit that shot in the 2009 PGA Championship, because that was really the end of the aura that Tiger had, this invincibility. He had the lead, I think, going into the last round. As the only time that he lost a 54-hole lead in a major. And, so that was really a significant event. Like, no one really thought that Y.E. Yang was going to beat Tiger in that championship. But Hazeltine has this very, very rich history. So when exactly did you start? And then can you talk about you mentioned the Ryder Cup with Davis Love being the captain, and just like your role as the host professional, for, really one of the biggest golf events on the globe.
Yeah, well, first, I think some of the tournaments that you just mentioned with Hazeltine, U.S. Opens, PGAs, Ryder Cups, U.S. Amateurs, it's had a full range of tournaments. And it's only 60 years old. It's in this really unique place in history. It was founded in 1962 by a former USJ president named Todd Heffelfinger, with the vision and the purpose to host these tournaments. That was why they were building it. And it was a land grab back in the late 50s. They came all the way outside the city to where no one else was, grabbed all this land, had Robert Trent Jones build the golf course. And then they had a U.S. Open 8 years into their existence. And they had a rocky start. The wind blew 40 miles an hour the first day. Everyone's shooting 80 something. And that's when Dave Hill kind of said, look, this is a cow pasture. And, and maybe he wasn't wrong. Back then it wasn't ready for the bright lights yet. It probably took Hazeltine about 20 years to recover to when Payne Stewart won in 91. That led to a relationship with the PGA. And, like you said, you mentioned Tiger finished second twice to Rich Beam and Y.E. Yang, and then the Ryder Cup. And now coming back to, we're supposed to have the U.S. Junior in 2020 when COVID hit. And now just a few weeks again with the U.S. Amateur for the second time. So in 2012, I'd been interviewing for head pro jobs for 3 years while I was at Marion, and getting very close. And the opportunity came up to Hazeltine. It was the biggest job that I had interviewed for. And some people would probably have the logic of, look, if you haven't been getting the job and this is the biggest job, you should probably set your sights lower. But when I looked at Hazeltine, I was like, this is everything that I'm good at, preparing for championships, high expectations, working at high caliber clubs that I've been at. I said, like, this is the perfect job for me. And thankfully they saw it that way. But when I got the job, there was a hint of disappointment in that I got the job in October of 2012. Davis Love had just captained the USA team in Chicago that lost the 10-6 lead on Sunday. And as excited as I was, and we're going to host the next Ryder Cup in the States, I wish they had just held him off for 4 more years, because if there was one guy I would want to be our captain, it'd be him. But I knew the history. No losing captain's ever gotten to captain the Ryder Cup again. But they lose in 2014 in Scotland, and they come home and they're willing to look at things again. And I remember sitting in my office February of 2015. It was snowing outside. Everyone had gone home. I was still doing something in the office. And I got a text from the late Tim Rosefort, who I knew from my time at Seminole. And he said, I remember you from your time down here, and I know your story, and you deserve to know they're going to name Davis Love as the captain on Monday morning in West Palm Beach. And I think the same, level of fear and excitement that I felt in 2006, getting ready to caddy for Davis for the first time was, this is either going to be a great memory or I'm going to be like an ex-girlfriend that he never wants to see again. So we need to do everything we can to make sure this goes our way. And my mindset immediately shifted into, what can I do to help this team prepare? The only thing that I can really help with is knowledge of the golf course, and as a home team in a Ryder Cup, how we set it up. So my family had just given me the last 20 years of Ryder Cup on DVD, and I sat in the basement for the next 2 months and immersed myself, specifically watching the losses. Why do we lose? Is it just this age-old narrative of like they're just better and they make more putts, or is it something bigger? And in doing my homework, I started to kind of spot some trends, and I was ready for when Davis showed up to start sharing some ideas with him. And I would give him a lot of credit, for somebody that was going through it the second time, that he was willing to rethink things and listen to people like myself and let me contribute towards the outcome. But in short, Jim, I think 2015, 2016 was the culmination of a dream, and a lot of things coming together and the stars aligning. Look, Tom Lehman was the first professional golfer I ever met in the spring of '93, and I ended up in Minnesota. He's our first assistant captain. So I was talking with the golf coach at Howard. His name is Sam Puryear. A couple weeks ago, and Sam used this word over and over again, and we've already spent ourselves using it in our conversation. Is golf is very cyclical, and Davis talked about in his Hall of Fame induction speech of, if you play in it and you're around this game long enough, the things that are part of your past will come around full circle. If you just keep your eyes open, you'll be able to see them. In 2016 was just a full circle for me, and everything kind of came together.
That is a fantastic story, and actually, I think that's great insight, because I think as a golf fan, you don't know everything that goes into a Ryder Cup, right? And I think there's a ton of work. There's a ton of, I'm a huge analytics guy, like just setting the team up for success. There's a lot of pomp and circumstance around the event, but I think ultimately, especially as a host event in the U.S., that event and the captaincy is going to be viewed on the outcome. So it's really like setting up the team to have success, to give the team the best chance to win that week. And that was a pretty decisive victory, as I recall, in that Ryder Cup. But like, what were some of the like most memorable shots or matches or moments that you saw out on the golf course that week?
Yeah, I'll give you two, and I can give you three, and I can also talk about this event for 10 hours. One that I share quite often, that as time has gone along and I've given a lot of more thought to my life and why I'm doing what I'm doing. Some people will tend to forget that Sunday night before the Ryder Cup week started, I was driving around the golf course with my wife. We had 2 daughters at the time. Now we have 3. We were taking some pictures, and then I had to get back to the clubhouse. They were having this like kickoff to the week. All the chairpersons were getting together, and I had to get back for that event. My wife actually dropped me off outside the golf shop, and Davis is sitting on the wall outside the shop calling the players that didn't make the team, and he kind of breaks from the calls and comes over and says hi to my family, and he kind of coochie coos my 1-year-old daughter, and I'm like, that's a moment, in the middle of like all these calls, he's breaking to coochie coo my daughter. So we finish the calls. We go back inside the clubhouse, and as I walk into the ballroom, PGA President Derek Sprague was at the podium. And as I walk in, a member takes his cell phone, he sticks it right in front of my face, and it was a tweet that said, "Golfing legend Arnold Palmer has just passed away at the
Oh
age of
my goodness.
87." And it kind of knocks you back. Like, like this moment is happening right now. And Julius Mason, who handles communications for the PGA, I saw him get up from the front of the room, and he kind of signaled me out to the hallway. And he said, "You see?" I said, "Yep." He said, "Well, Rich Lerner in Live From is racing in. They're going to go live here in about 45 minutes. Can you get that flag outside to half staff for when we go on the air, so it's already at half staff for Arnold?" I had learned a lot about flag code from my time at Marion. The 2009 Walker Cup, the logo, the flags were kind of in this arch, and we found out that it kind of broke flag code. The flags have to be in a straight line. So I've read about 50 pages of flag code, and I know enough to know that you can't just mourn the loss of your friend and fly a flag at half staff. So we actually got a proclamation from Governor Dayton that evening at about 10 o'clock, and we were able to lower it, keep it lowered for the entire week. But I went outside and sat on the other side of the camera at Live From, and Rich Lerner, Arnold started the Golf Channel, so this is their 9/11. They're covering the life of the man that founded that channel, and he comes racing in, and we ran about a 5-hour show, and I stood on the other side of the camera, and I listened to all these players from around the world call in to talk about the life of Arnold Palmer, but not once did anybody ever mention a shot or a tournament that he won, 1960 at Cherry Hills, or 62, 64 at Augusta, or, at Troon, et cetera. They all talked about the kind of person he was and how he made them feel. Fred Couples broke down and had to call back in. And I thought it was this great start to the week of like, look, this week is important. We all want to play our best golf. We want to win. But when we're done here, they're not going to talk about that at all. Let's all keep that in perspective. And if you look at how that week started, the Palmer family flew up Arnold's bag from when he was captain of the Ryder Cup in '75 at Laurel Valley. And they put it right on the first tee for both teams to kind of acknowledge the life of Arnold. And the Americans go out and sweep the first session in the Ryder Cup. It's the first time they sweep a session for the first time since Arnold was captain at 75. Like, sometimes golf just gives us moments like that, right? Go forward to the end of the tournament. And I know I'm not going to talk about a shot during the tournament. We could talk about the Patrick Reed-Rory match. We could talk about Phil and Sergio. But if I go to when the tournament ended, I was in the team room after the closing ceremony, after the closing press conference. And the players are in the team room packing up their lockers, and we're getting ready to head back to the hotel, which is where the real party is. And Tiger Woods was an assistant captain that year. You have to keep in mind, Tiger Woods in 2015-16, 15 was a down year, dealing with the injuries. He had the chip yips. He's shooting 80 and withdrawing a lot. Had the spinal fusion surgery at the start of 2016. So when he showed up to Hazeltine that fall, we really hadn't seen him anywhere for a year. I believe he needed that event. And he needed friends. He needed to be around people. And he was great as an assistant captain and just with the guys that week. But as the guys were packing up their locker, Tiger said, "Hey, guys, come here. I want to talk to everyone for a second." The guys gather around, and I'm kind of standing behind Tiger, and he says, "Hey, tonight, when we get back to the hotel, let's really stay up late and enjoy this one." And I'm watching the guys kind of are laughing. They're like, you gathered us around to tell us that? Like, you think we don't know that? After they stopped laughing, Tiger wasn't laughing. And Tiger said, the guys, the reason I tell you that is if you go back to 99 at Brookline, we have the great comeback win from 10-6, big celebration at the club. We go back to the hotel. We have dinner, drinks, party a little bit. But it's a long week. It takes it out of you. So about 10 o'clock, Tiger just kind of escaped the room, went up to his room, got in bed. About an hour later, somebody's knocking on his door. And every Ryder Cup week, it's players only on the same floor. And he's like, "I know it's one of you guys." And for 15 minutes, whoever it is not going away. Tiger finally gets out of bed, answers the door, and it's Payne Stewart. And Payne's got this big smile on his face. And he's like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Look, man, I've been in bed for an hour. You guys go ahead." Payne says, "No, get dressed. You're coming downstairs with me." He goes, "Payne, what's the big deal?" Payne Stewart says, "Tiger, the big deal is you never know if you're ever going to get this moment ever again in your life. So you make it last as long as you can." Tiger says, "Payne, we're going to win this thing every 2 years. I don't understand what the big deal is." Payne says, "You don't know that. Come on, get dressed and get downstairs." And Tiger said, "I'm so glad that Payne Stewart came back and got me. He goes, I'll always, I went back downstairs. I'll always remember that night, the team we had at that moment. And Payne was right. That was the only winning team I ever played on. And we lost Payne Stewart 2 weeks later. And it's kind of a reminder to a lot of the guys, like, we all think that because we're living in this successful moment right now, that it's going to last forever. We'll be able to do this as often as we want. And life just doesn't always work like that. I could tell you the guys got the message. The guy left the hotel at 1 a.m. and it wasn't slowing down. So I think Tiger had started to turn in his career, I think, as a father, and looking at life differently and understanding. He'd been through all that already in his life. And I think you're starting to see him now hand that down to a younger generation, his son especially, and helping them see the bigger picture.
Yeah, that's great that you mentioned that. I mean, we got to see a little bit of Charlie, just in other fairways. He teed off about 4 groups behind my son at the U.S. Junior, so we saw the fans coming. It was easy to tell, and I think he has so much golf wisdom to pass on, not only to Charlie but to this younger generation of golfers who are just they're great players, and I think that. To the extent that he can give back to the game, that these players can really learn from him and grow from that. That's fantastic. The other thing that I wanted to mention, I mean, you mentioned Arnold Palmer, and it really triggered something in my mind because his name came up right after the Keegan Bradley was named as the captain, because I think Keegan's the youngest captain since Arnold was the player captain, I think at the age of 34. And I just want, since we're talking Ryder Cup, I just wanted to get your take on, Keegan Bradley. I recall you posted on Instagram when he was named the captain. Like, what are your thoughts about Keegan Bradley as the captain?
Well, Keegan it's a break away from what's expected of us. And I think, so many people expected, I think when we were leaving Hazeltine in 16, we had an idea of the next 10 to 12 years of who was going to captain. Thinking, Phil would do a few Ryder Cups and Tiger would probably do a few Ryder Cups and Tiger still might. And Phil still might. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But we thought we had everything kind of figured out, and we come off this loss of Rome, and we're kind of going, what now? And it's an interesting veer away from what's expected of us. And I think so many people saw, the show on Netflix, and they saw that moment for Keegan Bradley. And I think what we saw from Keegan Bradley in that moment was his character of how well he took the news. But then you also saw him with his sons rooting on the team. And it would have been very easy to be bitter in that moment. But I think Keegan sees the team, like the bigger picture of what a team is. And I think it won't be too hard for people to get behind him because, like I said in my post, I think many of us see ourselves in Keegan Bradley. I think so many of us we either have unfinished business or we've come really close to getting something that we want and maybe we didn't get it. So to see somebody get this opportunity, you have Keegan, who hasn't won a Ryder Cup. Now you have Webb Simpson, who's played on 3 Ryder Cup teams and hasn't won either. So something has to give here, and I'm curious what they can learn from losing. But I think there's 2 words that I've wanted to see in a captain here for a while is that I wanted to see them be humble, and I wanted to see them be coachable. And I think Keegan strikes me as one of those people that if we can just put some people around him to help him become the best leader that he can, that he'll seize the opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you touched on one thing that I've been thinking about quite a bit, just with the game of golf, and just the successes in the game are awesome. They're awesome to have. But I think there's actually more growth that can take place in the setbacks. And, you don't know what the future holds in this game. I think the successes are really a function of the setbacks in the past. If you look back and reflect, you say oh, I actually, learned quite a bit from that. Maybe you don't reach the levels of success that these kids are often dreaming of without the setbacks along the way. So I imagine you've experienced that in the game as well.
It's funny, because there's a timing to everything. I really believe that. The year before I got the job at Hazeltine, we were in the finals for the job at Charlotte Country Club in North Carolina. And going to the final interview, the committee said, look, when you come out for the final interview, would you bring your wife with you? We'd like to meet her. And I said, maybe, but we're expecting the birth of our first kid, so probably not going to happen. And I talked to my wife. She goes, do you think it'll matter? I said, it might. They know the other candidate pretty well. I think we're kind of the outsiders. I think they're trying to see if we're all in on this. So 1 week after giving birth to our first kid, C-section delivery. She goes, I'm in. And we drove from Philadelphia down to Charlotte, spent the day with the committee, did the dinner with a 1-week-old baby in a car seat in the corner of the room, and we asked for the job. And we walked out of the room that night. We're like, this is it. Look, Davis Love's dad was the pro here. I mean, look at all the stars aligning. My parents lived in North Carolina. I went to school in North Carolina. Everything seemed to be lining up, and then it didn't. They took the other candidate who, when I look back on it even now, like, he was the right choice. He's somebody that even, like, I admire, but it was hard to accept that in the moment. We got home to Marion that night, and we were actually having dinner with a large group of people that actually introduced us. It's a group called Young Life. And I had to stand up at the dinner and tell them, like, guys, we thought this was it, and the putt didn't fall. And we can't make sense of it, but, we'll go forward and just trust that, there's a timing to all this. And I was going by the bar later that night, and one of the guys from the dinner kind of had this big smile on his face. And I said, what are you so happy about? He goes, I'm just smiling, thinking about, what either, God was protecting you from or preparing you for. And I said, I don't know, man, like, that was as good as it's ever going to get. That's the biggest job that I've interviewed for. Like, they don't get that good. And he goes, something's coming. And I think if we look at, my dad taught me a great lesson growing up, and I think a lot of us pass these lessons down. He goes, if you think about where you eventually want to end up, and you look at everything that happens from now until that becomes a reality as an opportunity to learn and grow, then you'll be fine. But so many times we look at these failures or these close calls as the final destination, and it's just a detour towards where you want to get, right? So I'm so glad that I have people around me to kind of keep me optimistic. I think that's what really happens in a lot of this, is that everything that's frustrating or a setback or a disappointment is, if you have people around you to just put their arm around you and be like, hey, it's all part of the process. We always say, trust the process. I don't think anybody's line of success has ever been a straight line. Everyone that I talk to, I've talked to Tony Pancake and too, and everyone, it's like, there's a timing. And like Tony Pancake was sharing with me that when he got the job at Valhalla, he did the interview, and then a snowstorm came in, and it allowed him another 3 hours to just talk to the committee. He's like, without that snowstorm, I probably don't get the job. He was head pro at 24. Mm-hmm. So sometimes there's just a timing. We look at sometimes when players win in tournaments, they get a bounce or a break, and we just say, look, it was their time. Sometimes you can't control the outcome. You just control the effort that you put into it.
Yeah. No, that's really inspirational. I hope people take a lot from that. That's really fantastic, Chandler. And I think maybe that's a great segue into what you're doing currently, because your career took definitely a change in direction, moving away from what you probably imagined was your dream job. And what were the circumstances that led to that?
I think to your point, yeah, I was just trying to get to the top. I wanted to lead, and I never dreamed as big as Hazeltine. But here we are, and I was replacing a gentleman who had been in the job for 37 years, which was longer than I had been alive when I took the job. So the opportunity was clear. If you earned the opportunity, you could be here a long time. And we were hoping to raise our kids in the same town. We didn't want to move. So we saw that opportunity. We were running towards it. We finished the Ryder Cup in 2016. We find out there's another one coming back, which originally was 2028, which is now going to be 29. And we looked at this as like, look, we're set. Like, we're in a really good place, and we're where we want to be. But the fall of 2018, my wife delivered our third kid, not me. Our third daughter comes into the world, and we're driving home from the hospital after the delivery. And my wife was saying, look, my chest feels tight. I'm having trouble breathing over here. Something feels off. And, what do I know about delivering kids? I said, it's probably just overexertion of getting out of bed and moving around after all that. But let's call your doctor. And doctor said, go in and have some tests run. You'll have peace of mind. And when they ran the test, they found a blood clot in her lung. I'd never heard the words pulmonary embolism before.
Yeah.
You don't want to hear those words. If anybody hears those words, you want to get to a hospital as soon as you can. Thankfully, we caught it when we did, and they were able to treat it, and we were able to resume life. But that winter, she just kind of said to me, usually I'm traveling and going places that are warm with members and doing trips. And she's like, it's going to take me a while to just come to peace with it. I'm going to wake up in the morning. So can you stay close to home this winter? And going back to what we're talking about earlier in the conversation, my dream as a kid was I wanted to be an architect. I came through high school in a time when architecture was still done on paper. AutoCAD and all those programs came along just after me. But I got the drawing board out and I just started drawing some things, and they were for me. And if they were any good, I might show them to people. It kind of reminds me of like George McFly, when he's like, I don't want to show anybody what I'm doing because what if they didn't like it? And I drew this half-assed kind of attempt at drawing the course map at Marion, and I showed it to a member at Marion. His name is John Solwin. He's now the director of golf at Pebble Beach, and he's like, yeah, it's not bad. He goes, if you want something to keep you busy, draw something for us. We got the U.S. Open next year, and I drew that, and at the bottom of it, it kind of had like the past logos of all their championships from 72, 82, 92, 2000. 2010, and drawing the logos was a great escape. And I wasn't tracing anything. It was just a way to kind of get through the winter here in Minnesota, and I still had some time left. So I started drawing this thing that I call the history of the U.S. Open. The original's just over my shoulder there. I said, what if I drew every logo for the clubs that have held it? What if I had the champions and their scores underneath? And as I was starting to finish it, I showed it to a friend of mine named Tom Coyne. He was getting ready to travel around America in 2019 for his book, of course, called America. And he was going to play all the U.S. Open venues. And I said, look, Tom, if you like this, just take some with you and give them away to people. I can't sell this. We can give it away. And it ended up being this great accidental marketing tour. But to kind of cut to how this became what we're doing, the summer of 2021, Jim, was just my wife and I looking each other in the eye and kind of saying, is this job us, for the rest of our life? Because it was kind of a choice between, I knew the expectations of the job, and there's nothing wrong with those expectations. They're high expectations, but I've made other commitments now as a father and a husband as well. And how do I balance all that? And can I balance it in this job? And we just kind of got to a place of peace where we just had to thank Hazeltine for the opportunity that they gave us. It changed our life, but we needed to go find something that was a better fit and would allow me to be a more available father. And we didn't know what that was going to be. That was pretty scary. For a lot of people listening, I would advise you to have that plan lined up before you quit your paying job. But we had to kind of figure it out on the run. I went back to the USJ and the PGA and said, look, we've joked about this stuff in the past. How do we make this work? And the history of the US Open piece with 51 logos, two other words that I never heard before, intellectual property. I had to go knock on the door of every one of these clubs and get permission for use of their logo. It's something that's never been done before, and now I start to understand why. So I'm more of a politician as much as I am an artist. But as time went along, and it took us 8 months to get everyone to say yes, what I found was we talked about earlier in this podcast about people helping people. I think we had over 500 people get involved in this process by the time we got finished with it. But what I saw was people understood why this is good for them and how it represents them and the history of our game. And it's really my love letter to the game. And we got the first one across the finish line. We got the PGA Championship and Ryder Cup not long after. And we've been working on the Open Championship for 16 months to kind of give people perspective on how these things go. It's not easy. We can see the finish line. We're close to it. And we're starting to talk to the NHL and some other sports about doing some things with them. But the artwork has been this great accident where I think God gave me something, a passion and as an interest as a kid that he brought back to the surface. And it's allowed me again to be an available husband and father to my family. But it also feels like going to Q school. This feels like second stage of Q school. We've made it through a few levels. We haven't quite arrived yet, but we've got to earn it every day. There's no guarantees. And, we're a team of 2 people right now, just trying to earn our tour card.
That is an amazing story and an amazing leap of faith. Again, another inspiration, I think, for folks that are listening, is to follow your passion and just the grit and the perseverance to make something into a reality and something that you just have this passion for. So I think people see that and they rally around it. I did want to dig into these 51 logos. Was it harder to get the first, or was it harder to get the 51st? Like, was there some sort of like steamroll or snowball effect when you got more and more momentum?
Both. No one wanted to be first and no one wanted to be last. So again, we're talking about something that's never been done before and trying to get them to understand how everyone wins and benefits from this. Like I said, again, the good news was a lot of people had seen it. They'd heard about it. They've been asking me about it. So I kind of went to those clubs that have been asking me about it to kind of get the ball rolling. I knew about 3/4 of the pros at the clubs on the list. So that helped. I kind of went through the golf pros, explained how this all would work, and then asked for them to advocate for it. We got a few early on, a few clubs were like, I don't think we're going to be in on this. And we had to come back to them at the end. There's I will say this story and people will be able to know which club exactly it is. And I think Jim, are you from Wheaton, Illinois?
Yeah. I lived in Wheaton up until about 4 years ago.
There's a very prominent club in that area that is a very small private club with not a lot of members. They don't play a lot of rounds of golf. And I approached them pretty early on. I'm like, look, this is going to be tough for a lot of clubs. I think of you all. How do you all feel about this? And the reply we got from the president was, look, 130 years of operation, we've never given our logo to any commercial use ever. So that's kind of a non-starter. But we are proud of our association with the USGA as one of the 5 founding clubs of the USGA. We're proud of our association with the U.S. Open. The first American won the U.S. Open there in 1911. And he said, this is tastefully done. It's a tasteful representation of our association with this tournament. So we're not going to say yes yet, but if this is something that everyone else wants, we also won't stand in the way of it. And I think once that group mindset kind of permeated through everyone, we were able to get there. But here's the analogy that I would give you for this journey is it felt like being Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. We had gone through this big tornado in our life. We've ended up in a strange land and we don't know where we are and we just want to go home. So how do we get home? And people are like, you've got to go meet the wizard. So, I follow the old brick road and I go down the old brick road and I'm skipping and dancing at the start and here come friends for the journey. But then the witch starts throwing fireballs at us. Tin Man is rusting over, Lion's getting scared, but we show up to Oz exhausted, but we're here. We made it. We want to meet the wizard. And, the guy pokes his head out the door and he goes, yeah, sorry, the wizard's not here. You got to come back later. And you're like, man, we came all this way to meet the wizard. And then she meets the wizard and the wizard says, you still got work to do. Go get me the ruby red slippers from the Wicked Witch. And there were a few clubs there at the end that were like, if they say yes, then we'll say yes. So you got to go get them first. And, again, like we kind of get back to the wizard at the end and you peel back the curtain and he's back there spinning the wheel. And again, it's emotional sometimes when I look at that journey and all that went into it and to get it done. But it's far from like a solo journey. Like I said, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. That's what makes it so emotional for me. I had asked Tony Pancake at the end of my conversation with him, who's that person who made or broke your career? And he got emotional talking about Dwight Game at Valhalla and the belief that he placed in Tony and what Valhalla had become. And I think as we go through this game, if we can't stop to have these moments of gratitude for the people that have been put in our path and the places that we've gotten to go and the things that we've gotten to do or be a part of, then we missed it. So all I can tell you is that when I look at these pieces of artwork, I see the history, I see the logos, but I see the faces of all the people that made this possible. Like that's what I see when I look at it now.
I actually just saw this poster at Oakland Hills in the pro shop just a few days ago, and it made me think of you. But I think the really cool thing about what you're doing and what you're selling is it brings the history of the game to life. Like it brings it to the forefront where people may be somewhat familiar with the history of these clubs or who won such and such open, or they may be surprised, like, oh, Jack won here. Like, it's maybe somewhere in the recesses of their brain, or maybe their dad told them about, that they watched so-and-so at this open. And you start to draw these connections and connect these dots, but you have it like all on this, whatever, 2x3 poster. And I think it means something different to everybody. I think that's sort of the broad appeal of the poster. Do you see that? Like when I know you go to the majors and you sell in the merchandise tent, is like, are you seeing this sort of real visceral reaction to, this artwork?
Yeah. And I would tell you some of it I wasn't even prepared for. But I got a message the other night from somebody who said, look, you inspired me to go play all the US Open courses. And I've started this journey, and I've called on people that I haven't talked to in years to help me out with it. Let me share a quick story from this last year's US Open. Really, too, I think going back to Pinehurst this last year was full circle for me. That was the first US Open that I worked when I was 21 years old in 99, right above me there. So I was there when Payne Stewart made the putt. And I was in there, I think, on Tuesday when Tracy Stewart and Aaron Stewart walked by, and we got to have a moment together and take a picture together and think about all that has happened in my life in 25 years. So on Friday, I sold out on Friday. I was getting down to my last couple flat prints to sign for people. And this woman came up to my stand, and she had a volunteer lanyard on, and she was looking at it for a while, and she goes, "What is this?" I said, "This is the history of the U.S. Open. It's every logo of every club that's ever held the U.S. Open, every champion, their score. It's all hand-drawn by me, and it's really my gift to the game of golf." And she was looking at it, and I could see her kind of pointing at and counting. And then I looked at her lanyard, and for the volunteers at the bottom, if you had served for over 5, 10, 15 years, it had a little ribbon that said 20 plus years, 25 plus years, 5 plus years. Hers said 20 plus years.
Wow.
And I said, look at you. I said, you've been doing this for over 20 years. When I bet you have a lot of stories you could tell as you look at these. And she started nodding her head, and she started getting emotional. And her friend kind of put her hand on her shoulder. She goes, yeah, Mary and her husband did these for over 20 years. And as she said her husband, she started getting more emotional. And I don't even know why I asked. It's a pretty risky question to ask somebody you don't know, but I kind of got on her level, and I said, is he no longer here? And she nodded her head, and she was having a moment. She goes, I would like one. And I said, can I sign it for you? There's a note that I'd like to write to you. And I've got this 30-year-old female volunteer working with me, and then these two women, and I'm writing the note, and they're all crying, and I'm starting to cry as I'm finishing it. But the note that I wrote to her is the last one that I signed for anyone that week was, to Mary, may this always bring you back to the moments that you got to share with those that you love the most. And I think logos unlock a lot of these memories for us. I'm wearing the logo of a club that I grew up caddying at called Somerset Hills. That's an emotional place for me. It'll always be my favorite place in the game. We all have different connections with the games, but logos unlock a lot of these stories. And what I really want for people with this artwork is I want people to walk into Jim Colton's office or his home and go to the artwork and point at a logo, or point at Oakland Hills and tell me about Luke getting to the round of 16 with Joe at the US Junior. Tell me about your experience. Tell me about Luke at the North South, Pinehurst, right? We all have an association. We all have a story. I just want people to tell their stories. And as we do that, we're bound to overlap with somebody or something, or end up going somewhere where we've never been because it just got us talking. I think that's the real magic that I didn't anticipate.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I did actually want to ask about the process of drawing these logos, because I think it's a painstaking process. Obviously, you have the utmost esteem for these clubs, so you want to get it 100% correct. But one of the cool things about the poster is just that hand-drawn aspect of it. It's not just cut and paste, right? So what's the typical process for just take your typical, say, Oakland Hills as a logo, which I think has sort of a hand-drawn horse aspect to it, which is kind of interesting. But how many hours would that take? What full scale size are you drawing it to before you, I guess, shrink it down to what's on the poster? And as we get into that, were there some, you mentioned Somerset Hills, were there some where you had that were maybe your favorites to draw because of the emotional attachment that you had, or just they were just fun to draw? And maybe what was one of the more difficult ones to draw just because of the complexity of the logo, or for other reasons like that?
Yeah, if you actually go back to, I think my first Instagram post, or maybe my second, was a time lapse of me drawing Oakland Hills or Chicago Golf, or one of those where, so Oakland Hills, what I do is I draw a grid, and we just try to use scale, and, how can I break down things into quadrants? And then I put the same grid over the actual logo. And So with Oakland Hills, I start with a compass and I draw the circles that are on the outside. Then we try to bring in the ribbons and then the inner shield, and then where those corners, I draw a box around that shield, divide it in half, and it's got to be the same on both sides. But I think what people like about it is, you've already mentioned it, it's perfectly imperfect. It's close, but it's not cut and pasted. So they typically take anywhere between, the simple ones will take an hour to sometimes 5 to 6, 7, or 8. The hardest one ever was whistling straights. I think I still have it on my Instagram somewhere. If you look at, they're close, but you can tell it's not traced. It's my best representation of what it was, keeping it pretty close. But anything that has detail in it, I love some of the logos from the Open Championship, the old shields like Royal Sinkport, Carnoustie with a tree, or Royal Troon or St. Andrews, some of those old, really detailed ones. I love the old historic ones. There's some really good modern ones, but I think that's the great conversation when people look at the artwork. They're like, what's the best logo on this? And let people argue about that. And then what's the worst logo on this? And let people argue about that as well. But again, it's people gravitate to different things. And it's just like I posted on my Instagram a couple weeks ago, like, these are my top 80 of all the golf courses that I played. Somerset Hills is number one. People are like, how do you have Somerset Hills as number one and Pine Valley at 18 and Cypress at 25? And I'm like, look, that's my list. Like you have your list, but like, that's what's great, is that we don't all like and appreciate the same things. If we all agreed on everything, life would be pretty boring.
It's funny you mentioned, I was just going to bring up your list because I remember seeing it not too long ago. And I mentioned one of the things when we first joined that I think you and I would get along great, and some of the discussions we had around golf course architecture and golf course history. When I looked at your list, the thing that immediately jumped out to me is, I think, is a respect of golf course history. You have a lot of the historic courses, near the top of your list. And I recall seeing on Twitter somebody who posted their like top 40 courses they played, and it would have been the complete opposite. Right. I mean, there were courses that I would never have as my top 2 or 3 that were on his. And like you said, it's completely subjective. And I think it's sort of a reflection of your golf journey, a reflection of your golf, evolution. And courses I had probably is my number one course when I was first getting really serious in the game are much different now that I've seen other places and have traveled the country and traveled the world and met people through the game and had a number of great experiences. It seems like you do get a chance to now, you said you had to go to these clubs and get their permission, and it seems like you're going around and playing. You mentioned Oakland Hills. I saw that you made a post around Moraine Country Club, which is hosting the Western Amateur, where my son is actually playing next week. So do you get to travel and see courses quite a bit now?
Not as much. That trip was, we spent 4th of July weekend actually out at the Jersey Shore with my wife's side of the family. And got to spend time with them. So my wife and my kids flew. I drove, and it's kind of how I get to play client golf. But it's also I want to stop in and see people and how are things going and how can I support you. But I want to start talking about the history of these places, and I need to go see them, and I need to meet new people. So I love hitting the road, but it's a balancing act. I mean, the kids are out from school for the summer too. So one other thing I wanted to show you while you were at Oakland Hills was I got the great opportunity. One of the members there this last year, member at Marion, he kind of came to me in the office and he goes, we want to redo the scorecards for Oakland Hills. Can you do this piece for the South and this piece for the North, and kind of do it in black and white? I'm like, black and white ink? Like, I've never done that before, but I don't know if you picked up a scorecard out there, but so that is my artwork on the South. And
oh, wow.
There's the big oak tree on the North course, but it was kind of surreal to pop open that scores box in the first tee and like see the scorecard, like felt like that became a reality. And it's pinch myself moments like that. It's like I like to believe I'm leaving behind something tangible that will last. But when it comes to Oakland Hills and that clubhouse going down on February 17th, 2022, as somebody who loves history and knows a lot of the people like Glenn Beagle at Oakland Hills who protects the history, Oakland Hills probably had one of the best historical displays of any club in the country. And we know how much they lost. But I think what also struck me when I visited Oakland Hills was you lost the structure, but you haven't lost the soul of the club, because the soul and the culture of a club are the people that inhabit it.
No, that's fantastic, and that was readily apparent. I think at this past week at the U.S. Junior at Oakland Hills is just the pride that the members had of hosting this event. Look, under less than perfect circumstances, like no locker room for the players. This structure that is just started under construction. Having to circumnavigate that in temporary structures, but the event ran perfectly seamlessly. It was a U.S. Junior that felt like a U.S. Amateur or a U.S. Open, to be perfectly honest with you, and with the crowds and the support that they had, not only for Charlie, but some of these other star players. And just you could just see how proud the members were to support this club and show it off and give these young players a championship experience that maybe their only USGA event, or maybe the first of many. It was just fabulous, and it's great that you mentioned that. And I have those scorecards. I had no idea of that connection, so that's really cool. Because I think, what are some of the kind of the tangents they starting with this poster and this idea? And you mentioned like the NHL. Like, are there other avenues and other doors that are opening, through these relationships and through the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, I'm always trying to navigate, like, where are we going and what are we doing next? I think if I had to rub the crystal ball, and this is a time capsule you can use on your podcast, and let's see where we are in 4 to 5 years. But I see a lane of similar pieces that I can do in other sports. With the logos, I do trophies really well. I do inanimate objects like trees and buildings and all those things very well, but I don't do people very well. I don't do landscapes very well. I've met so many artists that run laps around what I can do, that are struggling to get opportunities in golf or in other sports, that I envision bringing other artists under our umbrella. That's why I named the company the way I did. It's not my name, but we want to have other people join me for this. It's like one company called me and asked me to do T-shirts for the Players Championship. I'm like, well, I've got 101 ideas, but I don't have the time to do it or the bandwidth to do it, but I want to do that. So I need someone in my team that can do that. I think those people are out there. So I see us growing as a company that way through adding other artists. But I'm kind of heading into the public speaking and the podcast space myself. I'm a storyteller, if you can't tell, just from the time that we spent together. I love telling value-based stories. I love coaching. And the podcast is really intended for people that work in the golf industry. I want to build this community of mentors that we can hand down our knowledge, our journey, our successes, our failures to the younger generation, to prepare them to be the best that they can. And not just for golf professionals or teaching professionals or people that work in equipment or in merchandise or in rules or in tournament operations or in media. There's so many lanes that people can get involved with the game of golf if they're interested. I want to help them understand the landscape and how to get started. And then once they're in it, how to be successful. I won't do it alone. People like Tony Pancake, who we both mentioned, are going to be a part of this. And collectively, I think we can help. And there's a few other things. I seem to be dabbling in a lot of things at once. And there's a few other things that we'll see if they come to fruition or not. But I think overall, I'm just so thankful that I get to still be a part of the game of golf. I think when I left Hazeltine, my biggest fear is like that I'll have to like kind of cut off a limb. This is like, if I'm not around golf anymore, it's like oxygen for me. I was willing to do it, but I'm so glad that I've been able to stay a part of it. There was a song that was playing. I worked the U.S. Open at Los Angeles Country Club last year, and I was signing prints late on Saturday night, and a song came on by Steve Winwood. It was called Back in the High Life Again. There's the chorus is along the lines of like, all the doors that closed one time will open up again. And I think when we all play our best golf, and Joe, you know this as a caddy, it's like when we surrender the result and we don't try to control the result, all we can do is take the club back and hit it and surrender the result. Like that is when we're at our best. And I think I surrendered that result when I left Hazeltine. And it's been wild, but a blessing to see it come around full circle again and find ways to keep me around the game. Because like you said at the start of this, these are the best people. And I didn't want to walk away from all that. And I'm just so thankful to still be a part of it. So we'll see where she goes.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I did want to ask what is the origin of the company is Archive 22. You can find more information at archive22.com. What's the significance and the background of that name?
Sure. Yeah, and naming a company, I mean, first and foremost, we're about celebrating the history of golf and other sports as we get in other sports. But when you go to Marion, they have an actual archive room run by the historian named John Capers. And look, when you show up to Marion, they put you around the history. They want you to talk about it. It's a part of our everyday life. I always share the history with people. So archive was a nod to my time at Marion and where my love of history really began. And then, shocker, the company name Archive was already taken, so we had to find some way to differentiate. So on February 2nd, 2022, so 2/2/22, I had a meeting with Brendan Walsh, who's the head pro of the country club in Brookline, and I was kind of sharing with him what I'm doing. And I said, "You're having the U.S. Open this year. What do you think of this?" And he said, "I'm in. I'm all in on what you're doing, and just let me know how I can support you." And that was like really our first vote of confidence, and that's what pushed me to go back to the USGA. So 22 is kind of a wink to Brendan Walsh and at Brookline as a thank you for a nudge in this direction. So we are Archive 22.
Oh, that's a great story. I did want to shift gears a little bit and go back to Hazeltine. So one of the reasons we want to have you on is Hazeltine is hosting the U.S. Amateur here in a few weeks in the middle of August. You mentioned your experience in the Ryder Cup in terms of the course knowledge, the setup, and really helping Davis Love set up the course to give the U.S. team the best success. Like for folks that maybe aren't as familiar with Hazeltine, what can the golfers and fans expect for the U.S. Amateur this year?
All right, U.S. Amateur at Hazeltine. I think, for you, you're still boots on the ground there in Detroit. The golf course that you saw at Oakland Hills, having just played it, tee to green is going to feel very similar. No real tricks. It's right in front of you. You got to hit the shot that it's asking you to hit. On the greens, I would say the greens are less severe than what Gil Hanse did at Oakland Hills. There are a few fronts of the greens that you'll be mindful of, and we'll hand out some notes to you guys in just a minute. But tee to green, very straightforward. A great ball striker is going to do very well there. When you look at somebody like Gordon Sargent, who's a ball striker, right? Length is a thing. They can push it back to 76, 7,700.
Wow.
The wind can blow there, which might surprise some people for the Midwest. The wind can blow out of the south at this time of year. So you'll get a range of conditions. But I don't really think it's not like going to Marion where there's blind shots and positions. There are some holes you have to position yourself on. But it's a Robert Trent Jones golf course, which is what Oakland Hills was before Gil Hanse touched it. So I think I would put Hazeltine in the same boat as like when you go to Baltusrol or when you go to Winged Foot or when you go to Congressional, maybe even Oak Hill. Those classic golf courses that we're used to seeing good ball strikers show up and play well on. You think about maybe Southern Hills in the same category. I think that's what you got to expect is you're not going to be able to be missing it off the tee and going into greens and expect to score very well. Like show up hitting the ball well and you'll be just fine.
Now you mentioned, histories and the lessons from histories and the link to the present. Like, is there, if folks are doing their homework on some of the tournament history at Hazeltine or even the Ryder Cup history at Hazeltine, are there any lessons that can be learned from either the successes or failures that could help a golfer going into the U.S. Amateur?
Interesting thing about the 2006 U.S. Amateur is won by a Scotsman named Richie Ramsey. If you go back to qualifying, the same two golf courses, obviously Hazeltine is one. The other one is Chaska Town Course, which is a local municipal course owned by the city of Chaska. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Billy Horschel shot 59 at Chaska, 78 at Hazeltine, and was the medalist.
Wow, that's amazing.
So, I think it's about, how well can you kind of spike the football at Chaska Town Course and then, put something up around even 1 or 2 over at Hazeltine and just get the match play and figure it out from there. But I'd be curious to see how quickly people can figure out Chaska Town Course and how much time they will spend there. That is the not so obvious golf course. I'll put it that way.
All right. Well, That is great to hear your insights. Hopefully, we can keep this conversation going after this podcast and get all your news, all your notes and cliff notes for the course, and set ourselves up for success. But this has been awesome, Chandler. I think you truly are someone who is an inspiration. Just your passion for the game, and also I think your willingness to step outside of your comfort zone and take a leap of faith. That's something that not a lot of people would be willing to do. And I think like you said, you've come out of the other side. Like you've been able to stay involved in the game in ways that you probably never even imagined. Just hearing your passion and the emotion that's coming through this interview, I can tell that it's been hugely rewarding for you and your family. And I couldn't be more excited for that. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person in a few weeks here in Minnesota.
Yeah, likewise. So great to talk to you. Look, anybody who goes out and walks 100 holes is got my attention. These are all things that are done with passion. And once we start to understand our why, it's pretty good. So it's been great to spend some time with you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, Chandler. I really appreciate it. And look forward to seeing you soon. Andrew Lewis, welcome back to the Angle of Attack with Andrew Lewis.
Hey, Jim.
How's it
What's
going?
going on? Good. Everything is good.
Hey, we wanted to continue this series. We kind of previewed it last time. We're in this really exciting category, dropping your scoring average over time. We're in this category going from 74 to 72. And I think this is really where the bulk of junior golfers kind of sit, the ones that really are going to be playing at the next level. And there's I think a huge difference between, there's probably hundreds of golfers in the 74 category. And when I looked at Junior Golf Scoreboard recently, I think there was only about 35 that have scoring averages below 72. So this is going from elite to hyper elite. And there are a number of differentiating factors, and we wanted to get into that. But I think this is I get the sense of like, you really need to have a very refined skill set in order to get to that level. And folks are going to maybe self-identify like where they fit in the spectrum, depending on how many of these boxes they tick off. I looked at some of the stats like I've done in previous categories. And one of the interesting ones that I saw, which we hadn't really discussed in the past because it hadn't come up in the earlier segments, is around really strokes gained approach and par 4 scoring. Par 4 scoring was about 1.4 strokes better in this category. So really the bulk of this 2-stroke difference, I think, was in par 4s. And really, I think it's just the fairways and greens, proximity, more a higher birdie rate leading to the success. But when I think of this, like we've talked about this in the past, like I think it's ball control. It's really having a very consistent ability to know and see where your ball is going. And like you said in the past, like predicting the future. But what do you, because you have clients that are all along the spectrum, like what do you see as the differentiating factors between those who are at the 74 end versus those who are in the 72 end?
Yeah, I would say at some point you have to have like a super skill. If I think about all the kids that I coach that are near this, they all have one skill that is very, very good. And that could be driving distance. That could be elite ball control. That could be an incredible short game, or that could be like just make everything. So I think it's different. Just like you see on the PGA Tour, guys have different skill sets. I mean, there's just a lot of kids that shoot 74 to 76 that also have a good skill set. But I do think, like you said, it does come down to ball control. And I think that the reason that a lot of kids never get here is because they basically reach about as good as they're going to get. Let's say that their club speed never goes up and they just kind of hit it about the same. There's going to be days where they shoot like a 68 or 70, but the reason that their average isn't going to necessarily go down is just because they shoot too many like 77 to 79s. And that's where you have to be very reflective with you and your coach, or, this is maybe where, kids have coaching changes. You just say, I just don't think that I'm hitting it good enough. And the things that I work on aren't really delivering the consistency in my ball striking. And what that would mean, consistency of ball striking, would be my yardages are good. I hit it on the face the way that I want, and my start line and curve are fairly predictable. I have a good enough dispersion to hit enough greens. I mean, let's face it, you got to hit 12 or 13 greens if this is going to be reality. And if you can't do that consistently, you're just not going to shoot on average around par. It's just too hard. You're putting yourself in too many situations, missing that many greens, where you're just statistically, you're just not going to get up and down every single day enough.
So in terms of the conversations that you're having with the clients that are say in the 74 category, you're trying to get to 72, and you're highlighting these things, like this seems like a much finer skill. And like you said, they may never reach that pinnacle.
Yeah.
Right. But how do you start that conversation? I know you're into the TrackMan numbers. Are you having dialogue about this is what this needs to look like, so they can start to maybe refine it on their own?
Yes. Anytime I'm doing a lesson, I'm always very proactive at like showing the client the video. Here's the blueprint. Here's the TrackMan numbers. I would say with the majority of the kids that I coach, the reason they're probably not there is more driving distance, just distance in general. To where if you're hitting too many 5 and 6 irons on the greens, you're just not going to hit enough greens. And then if there are kids that maybe don't stick to their blueprint good enough. And that's where you start saying, hey, I need you to send me videos every day. I need you to do remote coaching. Like, this is unacceptable. Kids are changing their intent with their ball flight too often. I cannot tell you how many times lately I've had to have a conversation of, well, I'm hitting it left, so I'm going to hit a fade, and then I hit a fade bad for 2 weeks, and I'm going to go back to hitting the draw. I've talked about conviction a ton on this podcast. You can't be easily swayed on those kind of things. Like, you have to be very, very close with what you're trying to do every day, or the consistency with the ball striking really goes out the window. Changing the type of shot you're trying to hit frequently is, I don't see that on the PGA Tour. I'm pretty sure those guys, I'm pretty sure John Rahm's been hitting a cut the entire time. Pretty sure Rory hits a draw. I'm pretty sure Homa hits a cut. Like, you don't see good players like changing their DNA that often. That's probably a little bit of that too, like misdiagnosing and then like trying to self-coach, which is fine, but that doesn't mean that they're making the right decision.
Well, let's dig into blueprint again a little deeper, because I think that maybe that's a new term for folks, for listeners, and maybe their swing coach isn't talking about that. So what does that look like? Can you help elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah. So blueprint for me, anytime I see someone, I say, what kind of shot do you want to hit? Which you'd be surprised how often it's not very specific, and how often it's also like, I just want to hit it straight. And for those of you trying to hit straight, you're not going to hit it straight. You don't see very many people hit straight. It's very, very difficult to hit it straight, because for someone who hits it straight, if the face is a little closed, you hit a pull draw, and if the face is open, you hit a high cut. So now you have no predictability. So in general, people need to be choosing a shot shape. I like people drawing it more than fading it, just because I've seen so many kids hit it really, really bad when they fade it. So once you've created like this idea, I'm trying to hit the shot, then there's certain things in the swing that have to be happening that are going to produce the likelihood of that shot happening. So once we've created that blueprint of what it needs to look like on video, I generally come up with a set of drills that someone can do that's going to make it easier for them to do that. Because at the end of the day, it's much easier to do drills than to like think about your swing. If anyone follows me on Instagram, there's always tons of training aids and golf balls and sticks and all that stuff in the way, just because it's much easier to swing in that environment than to think about it a lot. So from there, I'm basically looking at the TrackMan data and the predictability of that in like 10 ball sets and saying, okay, you're doing this at a proficient enough level to where if you maintain this, there's no reason you should be able to do it. Oh, by the way, I'm going through the entire golf bag. That's probably my biggest pet peeve when I watch other coaches, is they hit like an 8 iron and that's about it. Like, I don't care, hitting an 8 iron, it's not difficult. I want to see it through the bag. You can ask Luke. I don't think there's been a session that I've ever worked with Luke where we have not hit his driver, because I need to see it. I'm not going to trust someone going, no, I'm hitting my driver pretty good. Okay, show me if it's good. Prove it to me, because it has to be checked. And I think for some reason, a lot of people just like avoid it. They almost don't want to see it because they don't want to face reality. It's like kind of like this hit and hope mindset of like, well, if I just stay away from it, maybe it'll show up and be good tomorrow. That's not going to be good tomorrow. And if it is good tomorrow, somehow it's not going to be good the next day. Because that's not how golf works. Like, golf works in predictability. Sorry, I'm going to get off my soapbox.
Well, I think
very passionate about that.
They hit very close to home, because I think you basically described my golf game in a nutshell.
That's how people think, though. They're like, oh, I'm hitting it too far right. I'm going to hit a fade. I'm going to, it doesn't work.
But my thing is, the most enjoyment that I get out of golf is a crazy recovery for par. So I feel like I'm just giving myself as many of those opportunities as possible. So I'm actually, I'm optimizing for what, my utility in the game of golf these days. But yeah, it's just kind of show up and slap it around.
Bang for your buck too. You get to see more of the golf course.
Yeah, exactly. One thing relative to blueprint, I wanted to clarify. I'm assuming you don't mean, every swing is going to look the same. It's a blueprint that's specific to a person, like maybe because of their grip or the way that they move or just their natural tendencies. Like, you're trying to fit. Not every fade looks exactly the same, or not every draw looks exactly the same, right?
Yeah, no. Everyone should be looking a little bit different. Everyone's swing is a little bit different. And in my experience, everyone's swing is close to being able to do what they want to do. Like, it doesn't need to be this drastic change. I work with 99% competitive players. We don't have time to make some massive change. I can get someone's swing to look like a blueprint within 10 minutes of first meeting them. It's not that hard. If you give them a couple cues and put them in the right environment, generally speaking, they're going to leave hitting it well and hitting the shot that they want to hit. Now, can they do that tomorrow? Well, no, that's probably where there's going to need some repetition. But getting back to, I'm just trying to create a certain ball flight. The ball flight really is the blueprint. The swing supports that. And then everyone has little characteristics. So it's nice to identify, hey, when you do this with the club head on the backswing, or you do this with your body, you're likely not going to swing right enough or left enough to create the shot that you're trying to hit. So like them leaving going, oh, okay, I understand very clearly what to do. I think that's the biggest difference when I see kids for the first time. They're just very lost on like how to actually hit the ball the way that they want. And that's where the inconsistency comes from. Is like, yeah, I hit it great yesterday, and then the next day I hit it really bad. Face contacts all over the place. So, that's why their scoring averages are, 74, 75, where they honestly could be 72 if it was just a little bit, if there was more conviction, I would say.
So it's like a combination of understanding and then also conviction, because obviously they're not seeing you every day, right? So they have to, their warm-up needs to look a certain way with this conviction in mind, getting them dialed for that particular round to play their best, but hopefully with predictability, right? I don't know. Yes. I've never had ball control in my entire golf career. So it sounds like a very wonderful thing to have.
No, that's 100% right. Like, you have, and this isn't just in full swing. This is distance wedges. This is in putting. People do putting mats to make sure they're starting the ball on line that has, lines painted on there so that the face and the path look a certain way. Like, if you think about that as a template, that you can kind of establish that in everything that you're doing, so that there's not these massive waves of like good and bad. Like, it's fairly consistent. So that's what I try to create with these kids, is having a blueprint basically through the bag. And I think that serves them well. I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of them are playing well, is they just know exactly what to do day in, day out. And they hopefully don't need me. They become better self-coaches. And then the more they see a certain pattern, they go, oh, that's me doing this. I know how to correct that very easily. And then, it's not like weeks of hitting it bad. I don't normally see the kids that I coach, like, I feel like I do a lot of checkups and just like tiny things versus like swing overhauls. I can't remember the last time I overhauled someone's swing. It's just not necessary.
Is that the other side of the coin around having the blueprint, is also knowing what the tendency is for it to drift away from the blueprint, and therefore knowing how to self-correct?
For sure, 100%. And some people, I'll use my son as an example. He can go on lots of different spectrums with his backswing, which kind of changes his delivery and his full swing. So he has to be really, really strict. Where with like your son, Luke, he basically falls into the same pattern every single time. Like, he doesn't have two or three tendencies. He really just has the same one. And so it's much, in some ways, it's a little bit easier to solve his versus Cameron, because Cameron's can kind of go in like two or three different directions pretty easily. So the monitoring for Cameron is probably could be a little bit more than someone like Luke, who doesn't seem to go in too many different directions.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And getting back to the numbers, like the ball control, I think, is showing up in these numbers as well, because with the Tiger strokes that we've mentioned in previous episodes, we have a recovery shot that leads to a bogey that we track. And then this difference between the 74 rounds and the 72 rounds, that's 50% less in the 72 rounds. So I think most likely like ball control with the driver putting you in a bad spot where you're not able to get up and down. So I think being able to know, like, okay, I know that I can avoid the bad spot to miss or whatever the case may be. And then also a third less double bogeys. So those two are somewhat related.
That would make sense.
But yeah, I think ball control comes in the mindset, and also more like 0.7 more birdies per round. This is really the first time we talked about like making more birdies. I think this is right where you start to see more birdies being made, and that's going to obviously be a function of proximity of the hole with your scoring clubs.
Yeah, hitting it better. Yeah, hitting it closer, having a tighter dispersion. Yeah, that all makes total sense.
Okay, this has been great. I think next time we're going to talk about this other side of the coin when it's actually not going well. Say you have ball control, but there's going to be rounds where it's not going too well. Still being able to shoot a score in the 72. So we'll get into that next time.
Yes, that sounds great.
Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, thanks, guys.
The Driven Golf Podcast is produced by Joseph K. If you like this episode, like it, subscribe, pass it on to a friend who might be interested. It really helps us out a lot. We'll be back in a couple weeks with the next episode. Until then, remember, in this great game, the journey is the gift. Enjoy the journey.
Check it out. From Baskin Ridge to the green, Chandler's journey supreme. Started in New Jersey, chasing big dreams. Lost a game of patience, ain't no easy scheme, but he saw the pros, felt the passion, the esteem. Hilton Head 92, watching legends play, like metal spikes hitting pavement, it paved the way. From baseball to hockey, he changed the game. Focused on the greens, putting skills to the name. Hazeltine, the battleground, 2016 ride. The West team triumphant, standing with pride. The machine behind the scenes, strategy amplified. The force setting up the course, Davis loved by his side. Passion and persistence, career transitions. Family at the core, following ambitions. From golf greens to artistic visions. Archive 22 with history's the mission. Challenges and changes, 2018 shift. Family and fatherhood, a different gift. Standing at the crossroad, life took a twist. Yet Chandler's faith and focus, they still persist. Archive 22, a passion reborn. Hand-drawn logos, history adorned. From Pinehurst to Oakland Hills, stories unwrapped. Each stroke on paper, golf's legacy map. Golf course architecture, tradition preserved. In every line and curve, dedication observed. His mission ignited, passion gets stirred. Driven Golf Podcast, spreading the word. Passion and persistence, career transitions. Family at the core, following ambitions. From golf greens to artistic visions. Archive 22 with history's the mission. Passion and persistence, career transitions. Family at the core, following ambitions. From golf greens to artistic visions. Archive 22 with history's the mission. Where history's the mission. Where history's the mission.